The man saw the crowd, so he wanted to see what was going on, but because a coin fell from a passerby, his expression immediately changed. Immediately after that, he discovered that the beggar's money hat had been stolen, and the thief was an animal with a duck-like beak. Seeing it run into the bank, the man hurriedly chased after it because it was his pet named Niffler. If he didn't control it in time, it would cause him a big trouble. As soon as he entered the bank, Newt was immediately questioned by the lobby manager. To avoid trouble, Newt had to find a place to sit down. While looking around for the Niffler, the man sitting next to him greeted him politely. But at that moment, Newt discovered that the Niffler was pickpocketing, so he immediately stood up and chased after it. Before leaving, Newt accidentally left an egg. The man intended to call him back, but it was his turn to do the transaction, so he reluctantly put the egg in his pocket first. On the other side, Newt found that the Niffler had climbed onto a small cart filled with gold bullion, with a look that seemed to declare it as his property. Just as the Niffler was about to take the elevator to the gold vault, the man from earlier hurriedly ran out and called Newt, saying that he had forgotten the egg. Newt saw that the elevator had closed, so he suddenly pulled out a wand and pointed it at Jacob. Immediately after, the two of them appeared in the stairwell area smoothly. However, this magical scene was discovered by a woman. At that moment, in Jacob's pocket, the egg suddenly hatched into a baby bird, but Newt just calmly took it and left, leaving Jacob standing there, bewildered. After Newt put the baby bird in the suitcase, he immediately discovered that the Niffler was sneaking into the gold vault. Immediately, Newt chanted a spell to open the vault door. At this moment, the bank manager also ran over and pressed the alarm button. But faced with this critical situation, Newt just gently waved his hand and used a move to immobilize the manager. However, as soon as Newt entered the vault, he saw the Niffler lying like a king on a pile of money. Newt had to turn the Niffler upside down so that everything inside the Niffler fell out. This made Jacob outside confused. Soon after, the security guard also arrived, so Newt had to take Jacob away immediately. But that was why he was discovered by the girl. As soon as Newt put the Niffler in the suitcase and was about to use magic to erase Jacob's memory, Jacob suddenly attacked him. Then Jacob immediately blended into the crowd and escaped. Meanwhile, the woman also approached Newt. She pretended to be a passerby, but was captured by him on the spot. It turned out that this woman, named Popentina, was a member of the United States Magical Congress. Newt is from England. Newt is looking to buy a gift from a magical creature seller. However, Popentina says the current situation is extremely dangerous because the dark wizard Grindelwald has caused a series of terrorist attacks across Europe. Until now, no one has found his whereabouts. Moreover, according to American regulations, keeping magical creatures is not allowed. Therefore, Popentina decided to arrest Newt. After that, Popentina continued to interrogate Newt about his handling of Jacob's memories. Under Popentina's questioning, Newt could only be embarrassed and silent. After that, Newt was taken to the magical headquarters in New York. At this time, high-ranking officials of the Magical Congress were worried about the recent attacks. Previously, when Security Minister Graves investigated, he witnessed the mysterious power that caused terrible destruction. Everyone debates whether Grindelwald is behind these events. Popentina brings Newt here, but the Speaker of the House is not friendly. Popentina tries to explain, but she says they are discussing important matters. Newt is then taken to the office for investigation. It is then that they learn that Newt's purpose in traveling around the world is to search for magical creatures. Not to lie, but to write a book to protect them. At that moment, the editor-in-chief reminds Popentina not to interfere with the Auror's investigation. Graves then walks in and asks what is going on. Popentina immediately says that Newt's suitcase contains magical creatures, but when she opens it, it is filled with handmade cakes. This disappoints Graves. The two immediately realize that something is wrong because the real suitcase is in Jacob's hands. At this time, he returns home and is upset because he cannot borrow money. Suddenly, the lock of the suitcase opened by itself and a monster growled. Immediately after that, not only did the monster attack Jacob, but many other creatures escaped. He was attacked and fainted on the spot. Meanwhile, on the way, Newt and Popentina discovered that his creature had escaped, causing chaos ahead. Newt immediately went into the house to investigate and found a large hole in the wall and Jacob unconscious with bite marks on his body. Popentina also ran in. Newt immediately used magic to restore the house. When she asked if any creatures had escaped, Newt lied that only the Niffler had run out. But as soon as Popentina checked Jacob, a giant rat suddenly jumped out. Newt quickly caught it and locked it in the suitcase. He comforted her that it was just a harmless animal. Jacob woke up and recognized the person he met in the bank. Newt also knows Jacob's real name. When Newt tried to use a spell to erase Jacob's memory, Popentina stopped him because she wanted to keep Jacob as a witness. Moreover, after Jacob was bitten, he had a strong reaction. Newt wanted to take Jacob with him, but Popentina said that the parliament would not allow it. Newt then sarcastically said that their laws were too outdated. Popentina then asked them both to follow her. But as soon as as they performed the teleportation, the Niffler was hiding in a hole in the wall. Meanwhile, other creatures continued to cause chaos throughout the city. When they arrived at Popentina's house, Jacob was immediately stunned, not because of the magic, but because of the charm of Popentina's sister, Queenie. Soon, hunger made him collapse on the sofa. Surprisingly, Queenie not only knew that Jacob had been hungry all day, but also that he had failed to borrow money from the bank. This made him realize that she had the ability to read minds. But Queenie comforted him that he didn't need to worry. She didn't pay attention to those trivial thoughts in his head. At this moment, Newt suddenly discovered a creature hiding outside the window. While the two were busy cooking, he intended to sneak out, but Queenie quickly realized, causing Newt to stop in confusion. Afterwards, Popentina made sure that the food was not poisoned, so they all sat down to enjoy it. During the meal, Jacob was completely fascinated by Queenie, and it seemed that she also had feelings for him. Popentina immediately reminded Jacob not to get too absorbed because eventually all his memories of the magical world would be erased. However, Newt suddenly spoke up and suggested that Jacob rest and continue searching for the Niffler tomorrow morning, but Popentina asked them to stay overnight. After Popentina left after cleaning up dinner, Newt immediately stood up, opened the suitcase, and climbed inside. This surprised Jacob. Newt told Jacob to go in too. Once inside, Jacob discovered that this place was a vast space like another world, but Newt didn't explain anything. He immediately checked Jacob's wound and made an antidote. Newt asked Jacob to take the medicine with peace of mind. Then Newt started his work, which was to cut the meat into pieces and put them in a barrel to feed the magical creatures. Next, Newt collected venom from a strange creature that made Jacob curious. Newt explained that this creature was called Graphon. Recently, it was discovered that its venom could erase people's painful memories, so he was researching it. Then, Newt told Jacob to follow him, but as soon as the door opened, the scene before his eyes completely surprised Jacob. Not only was the space behind the door vast, but there was also a giant bird flying high in the sky. Newt then explains that the creature is called Thunderbird and that he came to America for it. The reason is that he had previously discovered that Thunderbird was being illegally trafficked in Egypt, so he wanted to bring it back to the Arizona wilderness. Next, he introduces the endangered animals, a family of 3 aramons, a small creature that likes to follow Newt called Picket, and an okami bird, which is often hunted because its eggshells are made of pure silver. Jacob then helps Newt feed another group of creatures. This species has extremely cute big round eyes. While Jacob was interacting with it, he was attracted by a scene that looked like snow falling next to it. When he got closer to observe, he realized that it was a cloud of black smoke surrounded by water. Just as Jacob was about to touch it, Newt immediately stopped him and simply explained that it was an obscurus. Then Newt urged Jacob to go find the escaped animals. When he discovered that some of the plains creatures had disappeared, Newt immediately asked where there were plains, woods, and ponds nearby. Jacob immediately thought of Central Park, but he hesitated because he didn't want to miss the opportunity to be with the beauty. Seeing Jacob's infatuation with beauty, Newt explained that after everything was over, he would forget everything related to the magical world. As soon as he heard that he would lose his beautiful memories, Jacob reluctantly agreed to help. However, shortly after the two of them stepped outside, they discovered that the ground was full of sparkling objects. Then they saw Niffler pretending to be a model in a jewelry store. As soon as he realized he was discovered, he immediately ran away. Newt immediately broke the glass and chased after Jacob outside the store, which surprised Jacob. At that moment, Newt's suitcase suddenly opened. Jacob quickly closed it while Newt and Niffler broke the glass door and rushed out. But soon after, the Niffler ran away again. Newt had no choice but to use magic to make the jewelry in the Niffler's bag fly everywhere. When Newt caught the Niffler, the police arrived at the scene. The two claimed innocence, but that could not fool the police. However, what no one expected was a lion suddenly appearing, giving them the opportunity to use teleportation magic to escape. When they arrived at Central Park, Newt suddenly took out a hat and gave it to Jacob. Seeing Jacob's bewildered expression, Newt immediately explained that it was a protective measure to avoid being attacked on the head. At the same time, in another place, Popentina and her sister heard a roar coming from the park, so they quickly discovered that the two had run away. She immediately set out to find them. Newt saw some destroyed gates. Then Newt took out a protective suit and gave it to Jacob to wear. Next, Newt discovered that Aramon had mistaken a hippopotamus for one of his own kind. It was probably their mating season. So Newt took out a special perfume that Aramon liked the most and rubbed it on his hand and asked Jacob to hold it for him. Immediately after that, Newt opened the suitcase and started dancing strangely to try to attract its attention. Sure enough, the giant animal was immediately attracted and began to coax. But just as it was about to enter the suitcase, Jacob was suddenly harmed by a sea lion and the perfume bottle spilled all over him. Aramon immediately changed his target to Jacob. Seeing this situation, he had no choice but to run away. Newt intended to use magic to help Jacob but was suddenly snatched away by a monkey. Luckily, because the monkey was naughty, he accidentally cast a spell that locked it back up. At this time, Jacob had to endure a lot when he had to struggle with the huge monster on a tree. Seeing that Jacob refused to give up, Ahriman broke the tree, causing Jacob to fall to the ground. Jacob immediately ran towards a frozen lake. Ahriman was still chasing closely, but because the lake surface was slippery, he lost his balance and fell. Taking that opportunity, Newt opened the suitcase and led Ahriman inside. Before entering, Jacob licked him, scaring him. After this, the two became friends. Soon after, they planned to go into the suitcase to rearrange everything, but they did not know that Popentina had seen everything. When the two of them entered, she immediately locked it. Popentina took the suitcase away, but at that moment, a dark power suddenly came. Premonition of something bad. Sure enough, right at the campaign of a young black candidate in the hall, the light suddenly went out. A mysterious force lifted him into the air and then threw him down cruelly. Seeing his son die tragically before his eyes, the father was in pain and shocked. The incident quickly shocked the magical world. While the high-ranking officials were discussing countermeasures, Popentina suddenly entered and immediately became the center of attention. The chairman asked Popentina to give a reason for such a reckless act. Popentina explained that she came to hand over the person who brought many magical creatures yesterday. However, the chairman was extremely angry because the news came too late, because now there were already dead people. This completely surprised Popentina, but at everyone's request, Popentina still had to open the suitcase. When Newt and Jacob came out, they were quickly identified by officials from the British Ministry of Magic. Although Jacob was only a victim, he was still required to erase his memory. Looking at the body floating in the air, Newt immediately concluded that this was caused by Obscurus. Hearing this, the chairman immediately refuted and affirmed that there could absolutely not be Obscurus in the American area. She then ordered Minister Graves to confiscate Newt's suitcase and ordered all three of them to be imprisoned. This caused Newt to panic. He begged them not to harm his creatures. When the three were imprisoned together, Popentina immediately realized that she had made a mistake and quickly apologized for her actions. Suddenly, Jacob wondered about the difference between Obscurus and Obscurio. Newt explained that Obscurio were children with magical abilities but always suppressed their powers, thus forming Obscurus. Popentina interjected and added that once Obscurus lost its host, Obscurio would become a form of dark magic. Newt went on to explain that although there had been no cases for hundreds of years, a few months ago during his trip to Sudan, he had discovered a girl under the age of 10 possessing an Obscurus. However, the girl had died when she was only 8 years old. Newt and Popentina were then taken in for questioning. The interrogator was Graves. Graves discovered that Newt had attended Hogwarts and was nearly expelled for endangering the lives of others. It was only thanks to the objections of a professor that Newt was kept. Newt refused to answer, but Graves suddenly assumed that he was trying to start a war between wizards and humans. Newt immediately assured him that he was not a follower of Grindelwald. However, Graves took out an Obscurus from his suitcase, leaving Popentina stunned. Newt quickly explained that this was something he had helped a girl extract for research while in Sudan before. Moreover, if it leaves the preservation environment, it will die immediately. But Graves still sentenced Graves to death and tried Popentina for the same crime. At this time, Queenie also sensed her sister's danger, so she immediately came to the rescue. On the way, Queenie happened to meet Jacob, who was being escorted, so she approached him to talk. Thanks to her mind-reading ability, Queenie discovered what the inspector was hiding from his girlfriend. Then Queenie used that to threaten him and get the chance to take Jacob away. After that, they quickly exchanged information and learned from Jacob that the suitcase was with Graves. So, the two went to Graves' office together to get the suitcase back. Meanwhile, Newt and Popentina were taken to the execution room, where there was a death pool. She was extremely frightened. The moment her memories were extracted and thrown into the pool, her beautiful memories appeared, making her fascinated and willingly enter. But among those memories, there was an unexpected scene. It was a scene of a mother abusing her son, even attacking a woman to protect child. At this time, Newt asked the creature Picket to unlock the bracelet, and just as the executioner was about to act, Newt took advantage of the magical creatures to launch a surprise attack. They not only defeated the people around them, but also brought Popentina back to her senses. After that, Newt used the items in the room as a springboard to rescue Popentina. In another development, Queenie and Jacob successfully entered Graves' office to retrieve the suitcase. They immediately fled and quickly met up with Newt's group. After helping the remaining 3 people get into the suitcase, Queenie took it with her and left the dangerous place safely. However, Graves went to the boy in Popentina's memory. Graves healed his hand, which was injured from being abused. Then Graves asked him to find a child. Graves also gave him a communication bracelet. As long as he touched it when he found the target, Graves would receive the signal. signal. Seeing that the boy was still scared, Graves said that if he completed the mission, he would become famous in the magical world. At this time, Newt's group had escaped to the roof. Pope and Tina suggested that the current goal was to collect all the escaped creatures to prove their innocence. Newt said that there was only one left, but it was the hardest to find, an invisible creature. Pope and Tina claimed that she had a way to track it because she could contact the magical underworld where information was traded at sky-high prices. Then the group went to a secret base. Before entering, they changed their clothes. Once inside, Queenie curiously asked Jacob if people without magic were like him. He replied that he was just himself. This answer made Queenie very satisfied. Meanwhile, Pope and Tina said that most of the people in this pub had been captured by her. Newt asked about the boy he saw in her near-death memories, but Pope and Tina said that the boy's name was Credence, an orphan. His foster mother was an anti-wizard extremist. On the outside, she appeared to be a good person, specializing in taking in orphans, but in reality she only used them to spread anti-wizard propaganda. If the children made even the slightest mistake, they would be brutally beaten. At that moment, the informant peered. Newt immediately asked about the whereabouts of the magical creature, but the other party was known to be greedy, so he did not waver in front of the amount of gold that Newt offered. Seeing this, Newt had to take out a rare ice snake egg. When the tavern owner was about to agree, he suddenly discovered Pickett, Newt's universal unlocker. He asked to exchange information only on the condition that he could get Pickett. Newt immediately objected and firmly refused to sell. But when he saw that the other party was about to leave, Newt had to hand Pickett over to him. In return, the informant kept his promise and said that the creature's traces were at the mall. However, when Newt suddenly asked about the true identity of Security Minister Graves, the other party immediately stopped him and warned him not to be too curious because curiosity could cost him his life. But suddenly a riot broke out. Jacob immediately threw a punch to his face. After that, Newt quickly found Pickett, and the group took the opportunity to escape and ran to the mall, according to the clues provided. Here, they discovered the invisible creature doing free shopping, so they immediately split up to surround it. However, this creature seemed to intentionally lure the group. Newt explained that in addition to being invisible, it also had a special ability which could predict the near future. When the group followed them, they suddenly realized that this creature was taking care of an okami. The reason was because this species could freely change its body size at will. Just as Newt was about to lure Okami into the suitcase, the invisible creature suddenly predicted that something was about to happen. Sure enough, Queenie accidentally kicked a bell on the floor, causing Okami to panic and lose control. Newt immediately told everyone to find an insect and a teapot. When Jacob caught a cockroach, Okami stopped. Newt whispered to Jacob to throw the cockroach into the teapot. When the cockroach flew into the air, Pop and Tina quickly grabbed the teapot to catch it. Luckily, she caught it, and Okami happily crawled inside to enjoy his meal. Afterwards, the group put the creature back in the suitcase. Okami also returned to normal size. Newt bent down to apologize to Pickett for almost leaving him under it. Newt explained that he had just made a deal to fool the bad guys, but Pickett was still very angry. Meanwhile, Queenie found a picture of a strange woman in the room and curiously asked Newt about her. He just said it was no one. Queenie then used her mind-reading ability and found out that it was Newt's first love from school. He just laughed and said that it was all in the past. They were just friends now. Jacob took the opportunity to ask which wizarding school was the best. Queenie immediately replied that Yvette Mooney was #1, but immediately was refuted by Newt. He said Hogwarts is the best, but suddenly Thunderbird became agitated because it has the ability to predict danger. Newt immediately understood that something big was about to happen. Sure enough, on the other side, Graves had arrived at Credence's place and found the room extremely exposed. His cruel foster mother was dead on the floor. Graves approached the corner where Credence was trembling and asked what happened. It turned out that not long ago he had found a wand under his sister's bed. The girl was discovered and quickly explained that it was just a toy. But at this moment, the foster mother entered the room and immediately grabbed the wand and broke it. Just as the girl had time to say that the wand was hers, the belt was suddenly snatched from the mother's hand and ran away. Just as the foster mother turned around, she was suddenly attacked and died on the spot. Graves immediately asked where the girl was, but when he saw Credence still in fear, Graves immediately slapped him hard to bring him back to reality. Later, while searching, the two talked, and Graves discovered that Credence actually had magical abilities, but he couldn't control them. Credence thought that Graves would help him control his powers, but instead, Graves just said that he had to figure it out himself. This immediately made Credence fall into despair. However, later, when Graves found Credence's sister, she was extremely scared. Suddenly, the wall behind her collapsed, and the person behind the wall was Credence. At that moment, Graves immediately realized that the other person was Obscurio. Seeing that Credence was about to lose control, Graves quickly told him to try to control himself, because if he could, he would be able to control his powers. But it was too late. fate. Then, Credence turned into a giant, crazy Obscurus and destroyed the surrounding buildings. At this moment, Newt's group also witnessed the scene. Newt immediately gave Popentina the suitcase to keep. At the same time, he handed her the creature care manual. Then, Newt turned and rushed straight into the battle. But Popentina did not stand aside. She threw the things back to Queenie and quickly chased after her. Queenie wanted to join in to help but was held back by Jacob with a lingering gaze. At this time, Graves was also present at the scene. Seeing Credence's terrible power, Graves couldn't help but think that it was a miracle that he had survived until now. Newt saw that Popentina had caught up, so he shouted to her that the thing was the boy she had saved before. Popentina couldn't believe it because Credence was no longer a child. Newt also didn't understand why that was the case, but Popentina begged Newt to save Credence. Soon after, Popentina went to Graves and intervened, but she was no match for him, so she had to retreat. At the same time, President Mashusa also received the news, so she ordered Credence to be killed immediately. The Aurors surrounded Credence, forcing him to flee. However, when he ran to another area, he faced a group of ordinary police officers. Although they used guns to attack, they were completely no match for Credence. He delivered a fatal blow to the ground, then transformed into an Obscurus and rushed straight into the subway tunnel. Newt saw this scene and immediately teleported after him. Outside, the Aurors created a protective barrier, while Graves ordered no one to enter. However, Graves did not realize that Popentina had sneaked in and quickly attracted the attention of the people around, including an old man who lost his child in the previous chaos. Inside the tunnel, Newt finds Credence and says, "I'm not your enemy, I'm here to help you." Newt explains that he once met another Obscurus, causing Credence to gradually regain his human form. But just as Credence was about to trust Newt and approach him, Graves suddenly appears, using powerful magic to knock Newt to the ground and continuously pelting him with magic. This causes Credence to lose control again. Credence transforms into an Obscurus and launches an indiscriminate attack. When Newt and the others are at a loss for what to do, Popentina suddenly steps forward. She easily persuades Credence. Unexpectedly, he actually stops attacking. Newt realizes that Credence is reacting to Popentina, so he tells her to continue persuading him to save Credence. Seeing that Credence has revealed his true form, Popentina immediately promises to protect him with Newt. Popentina warns Credence that Graves is just using him, but Graves immediately denied it and said that he only wanted to help Credence gain freedom. Just as Credence gradually stabilized, the Auror members also arrived at the scene. Popentina immediately begged them not to interfere. Graves even warned them not to hurt Credence. However, the Aurors did not hesitate. They attacked together, and Credence was immediately blown to pieces. Graves was extremely angry. President Machiusa ordered a search and declared that Graves had broken the law and caused the death of a human. However, Graves believed that these laws were completely meaningless because they did not protect anyone. After saying that, he turned around to leave, but the president ordered his arrest. Graves immediately counterattacked and launched a powerful spell at the Aurors. At that moment, Newt quickly used Shopify magic to bind Graves. Popentina also quickly grabbed Graves' wand. Immediately after that, Newt cast a special magic spell. It turned out that this person was Grindelwald in disguise. Before leaving, Grindelwald told Newt that they would definitely meet again in the future. At this moment, Jacob also ran over and returned the suitcase to Newt. President Mashusa apologized for misunderstanding Newt earlier, but at the same time, she also announced that a crisis was about to happen because they could not erase the memories of all the residents in the city. But Newt said he could. Everyone was surprised. Immediately after, the suitcase was opened to reveal Thunderbird. Newt declared that he could not keep his promise to bring it back to its homeland by himself because at this time, Frank was the only hope. Then they said their final goodbyes. Finally, Newt threw the venom he had just researched to the bird. Frank took it and flew into the sky. Frank used his lightning power to create a storm that erased everyone's painful memories. While people gradually forgot everything, the witches also tried to restore the devastated city to its original state. Frank continued to fly back to the sky that belonged to him. But just as everyone was rejoicing, the president suddenly remembered Jacob's existence. She ordered that his memories must also be erased. It was an unbreakable rule. Then everyone sent Jacob off, but he said that there was no need to be too sad because they were not from the same world. However, Queenie wanted to run away with Jacob because she loved him. That moment made Jacob's eyes wet with emotion. However, he still had to face reality, so Jacob stepped into the rain that erased his memories. Queenie also gave him a passionate kiss before he left. When Jacob opened his eyes, the entrance to the subway station was empty. He quietly continued on with his own life. However, one day, while he was about to start screwing, he was accidentally bumped into by a familiar figure. The suitcase in his hand suddenly became unusually heavy. When he opened it, he was surprised to find that it was filled with pure silver eggshells and a letter. The letter said that Jacob was actually a forgotten talent. He could use these valuable eggshells to to open a pastry shop. Later, Popentina also came to see Newt off to thank him for helping her restore her position as an auror. But Newt just smiled and said she didn't need to thank him because he would also release a new book after returning. After that, Popentina asked if the girl in the suitcase liked reading, but Newt just replied that she was just an old friend and that he was still single. That answer made Popentina very happy. It turned out that in just a few short days together, the two had many deep feelings, but no one dared to break that fragile boundary. Before leaving, Newt promised that he would personally bring the new book back. Hearing that, Popentina's sadness immediately disappeared. At the same time, a newly opened pastry shop quickly became famous. Every day there was a long line of customers lining up to buy, and the owner of that pastry shop was Jacob. Suddenly a beautiful girl appeared and smiled at him. Jacob immediately reached out to touch his old wound and then smiled meaningfully. The movie ends here. Thank you for watching, goodbye, and see you all in the next videos.